The crack of lightning split the night sky as Rhett O'Malley ducked beneath the overhang of the Mercantile, his heart hammering harder than the rain against the wooden boardwalk. He'd faced down rustlers, survived a Comanche raid, and once stared into the barrel of a notorious gunslinger's Colt, but thunder made him tremble like a green boy on his first cattle drive. It had been this way since he was 8 years old, when lightning struck the barn where he'd been sleeping, killing his father and scarring Rhett both inside and out. La Veta, Colorado, 1878, a town nestled in the shadow of the Spanish Peaks, was supposed to be his fresh start. At 32, Rhett figured it was high time he put down roots. The cattle outfit he'd purchased outside town would suffice if only he could get through this God-forsaken storm. As thunder rumbled again, he pressed his back against the wall, eyes screwed shut, counting the seconds as his father had taught him. When he finally opened them, he saw her. At first, he thought she was a mirage, a woman twirling in the muddy street, arms outstretched, face tilted toward the blackened heavens. Her skirts swirled around her like a tempest of their own, revealing glimpses of boots and petticoats. She was soaked through, honey-colored hair plastered to her face and neck, yet she moved with the grace of someone performing on a theater stage. Rhett stared, forgetting his fear momentarily as another bolt of lightning illuminated her silhouette. She was actually dancing in the storm that had him cowering like a child. "Miss," he called out, his voice barely audible above the downpour. "Miss, you'll catch your death out there." She either didn't hear or chose to ignore him, continuing her strange celebration amidst nature's fury. Rhett glanced up and down the deserted street. No one else was fool enough to be out in this weather. With a muttered curse, he pulled his hat low and stepped into the rain. The moment he left the shelter of the overhang, his boots sank into mud and water cascaded down his duster. Each step was a battle against his instinct to run back to safety as thunder continued to shake the very air around him. "Miss," he tried again, closer now, "you need to come inside." She spun to face him, and Rhett felt the breath leave his body. Her eyes were the color of a summer storm gray with hints of blue, and despite being drenched, she was smiling. Not the polite smile of proper ladies at church socials, but a wild, unrestrained expression of pure joy. "Why?" she asked, her voice carrying clearly despite the weather. "Are you afraid the sky might fall?" "I'm afraid you'll get struck by lightning," he answered gruffly, extending a trembling hand toward her. "Please." The woman studied him, seeming to notice the fear he was trying desperately to hide. Her smile softened as she stepped closer. "I'm Amelia Blackburn," she said, not taking his outstretched hand but instead performing a mock curtsy. "And you, sir, look terrified." Before Rhett could respond, thunder boomed directly overhead. He flinched violently, nearly losing his footing in the mud. Embarrassment burned through him, hotter than any lightning strike. "Rhett O'Malley," he managed once he'd regained his composure, "and I'd be much obliged if you'd come inside until this passes." Amelia tilted her head, raindrops streaming down her face. "The storm's the best part of being alive, Mr. O'Malley. Haven't you ever just stood in it and felt its power?" "No, madam," he replied honestly. "Can't say that I have." Another flash lit the sky and Rhett tensed, waiting for the inevitable crash that would follow. When it came, Amelia actually laughed and spun around once more. 3 seconds, she said. That strike was less than a mile away. Rhett swallowed hard, all the more reason to seek shelter. She studied him with unexpected intensity. "You count the seconds too." "Between the lightning and thunder," he nodded, surprised she'd noticed. "My father taught me," she explained. "He said it was how brave people managed their fear by understanding it." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the raindrops clinging to her eyelashes. "What happened to make you so afraid, Mr. O'Malley?" The question hit him like a physical blow. No one had ever been so direct about his fear before. Most folks either didn't notice or had the decency to pretend not to. Before he could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal too much, the saloon doors down the street burst open, spilling lamplight onto the wet boardwalk. Amelia Blackburn. A woman's stern voice cut through the rain. "Get in here this instant." Amelia rolled her eyes, the carefree expression momentarily replaced by something more complicated. That would be my sister, Martha, always worried I'll embarrass her. She has a point about getting inside, Rhett ventured. Perhaps. Amelia sighed, looking wistfully at the turbulent sky. But promise me something, Mr. O'Malley. What's that? Next storm, I'll teach you how to dance in it instead of hide from it. Without waiting for his response, she gathered her soaked skirts and dashed toward the saloon, leaving Rhett standing alone in the rain, confused by the encounter and by the strange disappointment he felt watching her go. Martha Blackburn, a striking woman with the same honey-colored hair as her sister but none of her apparent wildness, ushered Amelia inside with obvious disapproval. Before closing the door, she cast a curious glance in Rhett's direction. Only then did he realize he was still standing in the downpour, his fear momentarily forgotten. As if to remind him of his folly, lightning cracked directly overhead, sending him scrambling for the safety of the hotel across the street. Rhett reached his rented room soaked to the bone, his hands still trembling slightly as he peeled off his wet clothes. As he changed, his thoughts kept returning to the strange woman dancing in the storm and her even stranger offer to teach him not to fear the lightning. Damn fool notion, he muttered to himself as he climbed into bed. Outside, the storm continued its assault on Lavetta, but for the first time in years, Rhett found himself listening to the rhythm of the rain with something other than dread. The following morning dawned clear and bright, as if the previous night's tempest had been nothing more than a bad dream. Rhett finished his breakfast at the hotel's dining room and stepped out onto the boardwalk, squinting in the harsh sunlight. Lavetta was a small town compared to Denver or even Pueblo, but it had everything a man might need: a general store, a bank, a couple of saloons, a small church, and enough good grazing land in the surrounding valley to support several cattle operations. Rhett had purchased the old Fletcher place about 5 miles outside of town, 300 acres with a creek running through it and decent fencing. He'd gotten it for a fair price too, mainly because Fletcher had died without an heir and the bank was eager to unload the property. He had business at the general store, supplies for the ranch and some personal items, but found his steps slowing as he approached the Grand Hotel saloon where he'd last seen Amelia Blackburn disappear. In the daylight, it looked respectable enough, with fresh paint and clean windows. A sign in the window advertised musical entertainment nightly. Rhett hesitated, then pushed through the batwing doors. Inside, it was cool and dim, with only a few patrons nursing morning drinks at the bar. A piano sat in the corner, and several round tables filled the space. A staircase led to what he presumed were rooms for rent upstairs. "Help you, mister." The barkeep was a beefy man with a magnificent mustache and sleeve garters. "Just looking around," Rhett said, removing his hat. "New in town. Heard we had a newcomer." "You the fella who bought the Fletcher spread?" Rhett nodded, approaching the bar. "Rhett O'Malley. Figured I'd get to know the establishments in town." The barkeep extended a meaty hand. "Walter Simmons, owner of this fine establishment. Coffee, first one's on the house for new neighbors." "Obliged," Rhett said, accepting both the handshake and the offer. As Walter poured the coffee, Rhett glanced around, trying to appear casual. "Noticed you have entertainment." "Best in the county," Walter said proudly. "Got a piano player from St. Louis, and the Blackburn sisters put on quite a show every night except Sundays." Rhett's interest sharpened. The Blackburn sisters, Martha and Amelia. Martha's the business-minded one, handles the books, keeps things running smooth. Amelia's the performer, sings like an angel, that one. Walter placed the coffee in front of Rhett. "You should come by tonight. 8 o'clock show's usually the best." "I might do that," Rhett said, sipping the surprisingly good coffee. "The sisters, they own this place," Walter nodded. "Going on 3 years now. Came from back east somewhere, Boston or New York, one of them fancy places. Martha wanted to start a proper theater, but Lavetta ain't quite big enough for that yet. So they settled on making this the finest saloon between Pueblo and Santa Fe." The information didn't quite align with the wild woman Rhett had encountered dancing in a thunderstorm. Before he could inquire further, the door to what appeared to be an office opened, and Martha Blackburn emerged carrying a ledger. She glanced in his direction, recognition flickering across her face. "You're the man from the storm last night," she said, approaching. "The one trying to convince my sister to come indoors." Rhett stood, his manners kicking in automatically. "Rhett O'Malley, madam, just moved to the area." "Martha Blackburn." She offered her hand, which he shook briefly. Unlike her sister, Martha's handshake was businesslike, firm. "I appreciate your concern for Amelia, though I should warn you it was likely wasted effort. My sister has her own mind about such things." "So I gathered," Rhett said, a small smile tugging at his lips despite himself. Martha studied him with shrewd eyes. "Mr. Simmons tells me you've purchased the Fletcher Ranch." "That's right. Looking to build up a modest herd, maybe breed some horses eventually. A worthy endeavor." She nodded approvingly. La Veta could use more legitimate businessmen, too many drifters and ne'er-do-wells passing through these days. She glanced at her pocket watch. "If you'll excuse me, I have accounts to reconcile." As Martha returned to her office, Walter leaned across the bar. "Don't mind her formal ways. She runs a tight ship, but fair. The younger one, Amelia, she's a different sort altogether." "So I noticed," Rhett said, finishing his coffee. "Thanks for the hospitality, Mr. Simmons. Think I'll take your advice and stop by for the show tonight." As Rhett left the saloon, he told himself his interest was purely neighborly, getting to know the prominent citizens of his new hometown. But the image of Amelia spinning in the rain kept intruding on his thoughts as he completed his errands. Later that afternoon, Rhett rode out to his new property. The small ranch house needed work, but it was solid. The previous owner had kept it in decent repair. The barn was large enough for his purposes, and the corral would do with a few mended rails. As he tended to his horse, a chestnut gelding named Copper, Rhett found himself eyeing the western sky. Clouds were building again over the mountains, dark and promising more rain by evening. "Another storm coming," he told Copper as he brushed the horse down. "Seems we picked a wet spell to arrive." The prospect of another night of thunder and lightning should have filled him with dread, but instead, he found himself thinking of gray-blue eyes and a challenge issued in the rain. Something about Amelia Blackburn had gotten under his skin, and he couldn't quite make sense of it. By the time Rhett had finished his inspection of the property and ridden back to town, the clouds had grown more threatening. He stabled Copper at the livery, then hurried to the hotel to change for the evening. Despite the approaching storm, he found himself looking forward to the night's entertainment at the Grand Hotel Saloon. The establishment was considerably more crowded when Rhett arrived shortly before 8. He managed to secure a table near the back, ordered a whiskey, and settled in to wait. The piano player was already at his instrument, filling the room with jaunty tunes as patrons drank and played cards. At precisely 8 o'clock, Martha Blackburn appeared at the edge of the small stage area. She raised her hands for quiet, and the room gradually settled. "Good evening, gentlemen," she announced with practiced charm. "The Grand Hotel Saloon is pleased to present, for your entertainment, the voice of the West, Miss Amelia Blackburn." The crowd erupted in appreciative applause as Amelia emerged from behind a curtain. Rhett nearly didn't recognize her at first. Gone was the wild, rain-soaked woman from the previous night. In her place stood a vision in a deep blue gown that matched her storm-colored eyes. Her honey blonde hair was arranged in an elegant style, adorned with a single blue feather. She moved with poise and confidence to the center of the small stage. The piano began a gentle introduction, and when Amelia opened her mouth to sing, Rhett understood Walter Simmons's praise. Her voice was clear and strong, with a warmth that seemed to envelop the entire room. She sang a popular ballad about lost love, her expression conveying every emotion in the lyrics. Rhett found himself entranced, hardly noticing as the first rumbles of thunder sounded outside. It wasn't until a particularly loud crash that he startled, nearly spilling his drink. No one else seemed to notice, their attention fixed on Amelia's performance. When the song ended, the audience broke into enthusiastic applause. Amelia smiled and curtsied, then launched into a livelier tune that had many patrons tapping their feet or drumming fingers on tables. Outside, the storm gathered strength. Lightning flashed through the windows and rain began to patter against the glass. Rhett fought to keep his attention on the performance rather than the weather, but with each thunderclap, his tension mounted. After her third song, Amelia paused to acknowledge the audience. Her gaze swept the room, stopping when it reached Rhett in his corner. A smile of recognition touched her lips before she continued her set. By the time she finished her performance an hour later, the storm was in full fury outside. The crowd gave Amelia a standing ovation, which she accepted with graceful nods before disappearing behind the curtain. Rhett remained at his table, ordering another whiskey despite knowing it wouldn't calm his nerves. He debated waiting out the storm or making a dash for the hotel. The distance wasn't far, but the prospect of being caught in the open during lightning made his palms sweat. Mr. O'Malley. He looked up to find Amelia standing beside his table, a shawl draped over her performance gown. Up close, he could see the light sheen of perspiration on her face from her exertions on stage, yet she somehow looked even more beautiful than before. "Miss Blackburn," he said, standing quickly, "your performance was remarkable. Thank you." She glanced toward the windows as lightning illuminated the street. "I believe I made you a promise last night." Rhett frowned in confusion. "I don't recall you promising anything, Miss Blackburn. I said I would teach you to dance in the storm instead of hiding from it." Her eyes gleamed with the same wildness he'd witnessed the previous night. "Unless you've changed your mind, I never agreed to any such lesson," he protested, even as his heart rate increased at the thought. Amelia tilted her head, studying him. "Are you afraid of me, Mr. O'Malley, or the storm?" "Both, perhaps," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. She laughed, the sound as musical as her singing. "At least you're forthright. Most men in town pretend not to be afraid of anything." She extended her hand. "Come with me." Against his better judgment, Rhett found himself taking her offered hand. "Your sister won't approve." "Martha rarely approves of anything I do," Amelia replied with a shrug. "It's our long-standing arrangement." She led him not toward the front door as he'd feared, but up the stairs to the second floor and down a hallway. Opening a door near the end, she ushered him into what appeared to be a private sitting room. A large window dominated one wall, offering a view of the main street and the storm beyond. "My sanctuary," she explained, lighting a lamp. The room was cozy with bookshelves, a comfortable-looking settee, and a writing desk. "Martha and I have quarters in the back, but this is where I come to think and to watch the storms. You truly do love them, don't you?" Rhett asked, keeping a wary distance from the window as lightning flashed outside. "I do." Amelia moved to stand directly before the glass. "There's such beauty in their wildness, don't you think? Such raw power, completely beyond human control." "That's precisely what terrifies me about them," Rhett admitted. She turned to look at him, her expression softening. "What happened to make you fear them so much?" Rhett hesitated. He rarely spoke of that night, but something about Amelia's direct gaze made him want to explain. "I was 8, he began, the words coming slowly at first. "Sleeping in the loft of our barn in Nebraska. My father was below, tending to a sick mare. Lightning struck the barn, the fire. He swallowed hard. I survived. My father didn't." Amelia's eyes filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Rhett." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and somehow it made the moment more intimate, more real. "I have a scar," he continued, gesturing to his right side, "where a burning beam fell on me, but the real scars are deeper. Every time I hear thunder, I'm that terrified boy again, watching my world burn." Amelia crossed the room to stand before him. "May I?" she asked, holding out her hand. Uncertain of her intentions but unable to refuse, Rhett nodded. She placed her palm against his chest, directly over his heart. "Feel that?" she asked. "Your heart racing with the storm, that's not weakness, Rhett. That's your body remembering to be alive." Her touch was warm through the fabric of his shirt, steadying somehow despite the simplicity of the gesture. Thunder rumbled again, but Rhett found his focus anchored to the point where her hand met his chest. "When I was 12, Amelia said softly, "my parents and I were caught in a terrible storm on our way home from the theater in Boston. Our carriage was struck by lightning. The horses panicked and bolted. The carriage overturned." Her voice remained steady, but Rhett could see the old pain in her eyes. "I was thrown clear. My parents weren't so fortunate." Rhett covered her hand with his own. "So you understand the fear." "I do," she agreed. But afterward, something strange happened. Instead of fearing storms, I began to feel connected to them, as if my parents' spirits somehow lived in that power. She smiled sadly. Martha thinks it's foolishness, perhaps it is. But when I stand in the rain and feel the thunder shake the earth, I don't feel alone anymore. Rhett had never considered such a perspective. For 24 years, he'd seen storms only as harbingers of destruction and painful memories. "Come," Amelia said, gently tugging him toward the window. "Just look at it first, you don't have to go out in it." Reluctantly, Rhett allowed her to position him before the glass. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the empty street below. "Count with me," she instructed as the flash faded. 1, 2. They counted together until the thunder followed. 4 seconds, Amelia said. "It's moving away from us now." She stood beside him at the window, her shoulder touching his arm. "Look at how the lightning turns the raindrops to silver for just a moment, like falling stars." Rhett tried to see it through her eyes, this beauty she described. The next flash came, and he forced himself not to flinch away, instead watching as the raindrops briefly transformed in the light. "I see it," he said softly, surprised to find he truly did. They stood together at the window for what might have been minutes or an hour, counting between lightning and thunder, Amelia pointing out patterns in the storm's behavior. Gradually, Rhett felt some of his tension ease, not disappearing but becoming manageable in a way it hadn't been before. "Thank you," he said finally, as the storm began to abate. "This isn't quite dancing in the rain, but it's more than I've managed in years." "Baby steps, Mr. O'Malley," Amelia replied with a smile. "Rome wasn't built in a day, and fearless storm dancers aren't made in one night." A knock at the door interrupted them. Martha entered without waiting for a response, her expression cooling when she saw Rhett. "Amelia, you're needed downstairs," she said, her tone revealing nothing. "Mr. Jefferson is asking for an encore. Tell him I'll be right down," Amelia replied. Martha lingered in the doorway. "Mr. O'Malley, while we appreciate your patronage, this is a private area of our establishment." "My fault entirely, Martha," Amelia interjected. "I invited him up to see the storm from a better vantage point." Martha's lips thinned. "Nevertheless, I'm sure Mr. O'Malley understands that appearances must be maintained in a town like La Veta." "Of course," Rhett said, reaching for his hat. "I apologize for any impropriety, Miss Blackburn. Thank you for your hospitality, Amelia, Miss Amelia." Amelia's eyes twinkled with amusement at his correction. "The storm's nearly passed, Mr. O'Malley. Perhaps you'll make it back to your lodgings without getting too wet." "I believe I will," he agreed, surprised to realize he'd forgotten about the logistics of leaving during the storm. "Good evening, ladies." As he descended the stairs, Rhett heard Martha's hushed but insistent voice behind him, though he couldn't make out her words. Whatever she was saying, he doubted it was complimentary to him. The rest of the patrons paid him little mind as he made his way through the saloon and out into the damp night. The rain had indeed slowed to a drizzle, and the thunder was now a distant grumble. Rhett walked back to his hotel, his thoughts full of storm-gray eyes and unexpected connections. Over the next 2 weeks, Rhett threw himself into work at his ranch. There was plenty to do: fences to mend, the house to clean and repair, and arrangements to make for the cattle he planned to purchase. He hired 2 ranch hands, brothers named Sam and Thomas Jenkins, who had worked the Fletcher place under its previous owner. He made regular trips into town for supplies, but deliberately avoided the Grand Hotel saloon. Not because he didn't want to see Amelia again, quite the opposite, but because Martha's disapproval had made it clear that his interest might cause problems for the sisters. The weather remained unsettled, with afternoon thunderstorms rolling through every few days. Each time, Rhett found himself pausing in his work, forcing himself to watch the approach of the clouds instead of seeking immediate shelter. He tried to see the storms, as Amelia did, as something powerful but also beautiful. It wasn't easy, but he found that counting the seconds between lightning and thunder still helped, now reminding him of their shared experience at the window rather than just his childhood trauma. On a Thursday afternoon, Rhett was in town purchasing fencing wire when he spotted Amelia emerging from the general store, a basket over her arm. She wore a simple day dress of pale yellow, her hair partially covered by a matching bonnet. Without the stage makeup and elegant gown, she looked younger, though no less striking. She noticed him at the same moment, her face brightening with a smile that made his pulse quicken. "Mr. O'Malley, I was beginning to think you'd left town." "Just busy at the ranch," he explained, tipping his hat. "It needed more work than I'd anticipated." "So I've heard. Sam Jenkins's wife attends my sister's ladies' auxiliary meetings. She says you're working those men harder than Mr. Fletcher ever did," Rhett grimaced. "Not by intention. There's just much to be done before winter." "I'm teasing you," Amelia said, her eyes sparkling. "Clara Jenkins also says you're the fairest boss they've had and that Sam comes home in better spirits than he has in years." Relief washed over him. "That's good to hear. They're good men." An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Amelia adjusted her basket. "I should be getting back. Martha's expecting these supplies. Of course, I wouldn't want to keep you." Rhett hesitated, then added, "I've been practicing, you know." "Practicing?" Amelia's brow furrowed in confusion. "Watching the storms," he explained. "Trying to see them as you do," her expression softened. "And any progress, some," he admitted. "I still don't dance in them, but I don't hide in the root cellar anymore either." Amelia laughed, the sound drawing glances from passers-by on the boardwalk. "That's something, at least." She paused, seeming to consider her next words carefully. "I'm performing a new song this Saturday evening, something I wrote myself. If you happen to be in the audience, I'd value your opinion on it." Rhett felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "I'd be honored to hear it." 8 o'clock, she reminded him. "Don't be late, it's the opening number." With that, she continued down the boardwalk, leaving Rhett watching after her with what he suspected was a foolish grin on his face. Saturday evening found Rhett back at the Grand Hotel saloon, this time in a freshly pressed shirt and his best waistcoat. He'd even splurged on a haircut and a proper shave at the barber earlier that day, a fact that earned him knowing looks from the barber and several comments about courting clothes. He wasn't courting Amelia Blackburn, he told himself. He barely knew the woman. But as he secured a table closer to the stage this time, he couldn't deny the anticipation he felt at seeing her perform again. The saloon was even more crowded than before, with every table filled and men standing along the walls. Walter Simmons seemed to be doing a brisk business at the bar, assisted by 2 younger men serving drinks to the tables. At precisely 8 o'clock, Martha appeared to introduce her sister, exactly as before. But when Amelia emerged from behind the curtain, Rhett felt his breath catch. She wore a gown of deep emerald green that complemented her coloring perfectly, her hair styled in an elaborate arrangement of curls. But it was her expression that truly captivated him, a mixture of confidence and vulnerability that suggested the song she was about to perform meant something special to her. The piano began a gentle, melancholy introduction, and then Amelia began to sing. The song was unlike anything Rhett had heard before, not a traditional ballad or a popular tune, but something hauntingly original. The lyrics spoke of finding strength in unexpected places and beauty in what others feared. Of transformation and courage and reaching for something beyond the safety of the known. Rhett knew, with absolute certainty, that she had written it about their conversations, about storms and fear and finding new perspectives. The realization made something tighten in his chest, a feeling both uncomfortable and exhilarating. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of profound silence before the audience erupted in applause. Several men rose to their feet, shouting bravo and other accolades. Amelia's smile was radiant as she acknowledged the response, her eyes finding Rhett's in the crowd. The connection between them in that moment felt tangible, as real as a touch. She continued with her regular repertoire after that, but Rhett found himself waiting for the performance to end, eager to speak with her about the song that had affected him so deeply. When Amelia finally took her last bow, Rhett made his way toward the side of the stage, hoping to catch her before she disappeared upstairs. Martha intercepted him, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. O'Malley," she said, "I believe my sister was hoping you'd attend tonight." "She mentioned a new song," Rhett replied. "It was remarkable." Something in Martha's demeanor shifted slightly. Yes, she's been working on it for days. Most of our patrons wouldn't appreciate the difference between her original work and the popular songs, but she was determined to perform it tonight. Rhett sensed that Martha was evaluating him, measuring him against some standard he couldn't quite discern. Would it be possible to speak with her briefly, to congratulate her on the performance? Martha seemed to come to a decision. You may join us for tea in our sitting room if you wish. Amelia will be changing, but she'll join us shortly. The invitation surprised him, given Martha's previous coolness. Thank you, I'd be honored. Martha led him upstairs, this time to a different room than the one Amelia had shown him. This space was clearly the sisters' main sitting room, more formally arranged and less personal than Amelia's sanctuary. Martha gestured for him to take a seat while she arranged for tea to be brought up. My sister seems to have taken a liking to you, Mr. O'Malley, Martha said once they were settled with steaming cups. Her tone was conversational, but Rhett sensed the seriousness beneath it. I admire her spirit, he replied carefully, and her talent, of course, MMM. Martha sipped her tea. Amelia has always had an excess of spirit and talent. What she lacks is judgment sometimes, particularly regarding men. Rhett stiffened slightly. I assure you, my intentions are no doubt honorable, Martha interrupted. You seem a decent sort, Mr. O'Malley. But you should know that we came west to escape certain difficulties in Boston. Difficulties stemming from a man who also admired Amelia's spirit and talent until he decided they needed to be controlled rather than celebrated. Understanding dawned. Someone hurt her. Not physically, Martha clarified, but there are other ways to damage a soul. Jonathan Mercer was from one of Boston's oldest families. He courted Amelia properly, charmed us both, proposed marriage with every appearance of devotion. It was only after the engagement that his true nature emerged, his need to dictate her every movement, to discourage her singing, to isolate her from friends who weren't suitable. Rhett felt a surge of anger toward this unknown man. What happened? She broke the engagement, causing quite the scandal. Mr. Mercer did not take rejection well. His family had significant influence in Boston society. Doors began closing to us. Rumors spread. Eventually, it became clear that remaining would mean watching Amelia's spirit slowly crushed. Martha's expression softened with genuine affection. I could not allow that, so you came west, Rhett concluded, as far from Boston as you could manage. Precisely. We purchased this establishment with our inheritance, and we've built a life here. Amelia sings, I manage the business, and no one tells either of us what we can or cannot do. Martha fixed him with a pointed look. I intend to keep it that way, Mr. O'Malley. Before Rhett could respond, the door opened, and Amelia entered. She had changed from her performance gown into a simpler evening dress of deep blue, her hair loosened from its elaborate style but still elegantly arranged. Martha, she said, her tone holding a hint of warning. I hope you haven't been interrogating Mr. O'Malley in my absence. Merely getting acquainted, Martha replied smoothly, rising. I'll leave you two to discuss your musical triumph. I should check on things downstairs anyway. She paused at the door. Don't forget we have inventory to complete tomorrow, Amelia. Once Martha had departed, Amelia took her sister's vacated chair. Whatever she told you about Boston, I hope it doesn't change your opinion of me. It only confirms what I already suspected, Rhett said honestly, that you're a woman of exceptional courage. A slight blush colored Amelia's cheeks. The song, did you understand it? I believe so, he replied. It was about finding beauty in what we fear, about storms both the literal kind and the ones we weather in life. She nodded, pleased with his interpretation. I've never written a song for someone before. It felt different, performing it, I mean. It was beautiful, Amelia. He used her given name deliberately, wanting the moment to hold the same intimacy as her song had conveyed. Thank you for sharing it. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily between them. Rhett told her about his years working cattle drives, about his dream of breeding horses, about the books he loved to read during the quiet winter months. Amelia shared stories of her childhood in Boston, of her earliest memories singing with her mother, of her and Martha's journey west and their determination to succeed on their own terms. As the evening grew later, Rhett reluctantly acknowledged that he should leave. "I've taken enough of your time," he said, rising, "and I have an early start tomorrow. Will you come to the next performance?" Amelia asked, walking him to the door. "I wouldn't miss it," he promised. At the doorway, he hesitated, then took her hand gently. "Thank you for the song, Amelia. It meant more than I can properly express." Her fingers tightened around his. "There's a storm forecast for Tuesday," she said, her eyes holding his. "Meet me at the edge of town where the road curves toward your ranch, 4 o'clock. Rhett knew what she was proposing, another lesson in facing his fears, this time not from the safety of a window. The prospect both terrified and exhilarated him. "Tuesday at 4, he agreed, "though I can't promise any dancing." "We'll see," she replied with a smile that stayed with him all the way back to his hotel. Tuesday arrived with ominous clouds building on the western horizon, exactly as predicted. Rhett spent the morning distracted, checking the sky repeatedly as he and the Jenkins brothers repaired a section of fence. "Going to be a big one," Sam observed, following Rhett's gaze toward the gathering thunderheads. "Might want to finish up early, boss." Under normal circumstances, Rhett would have agreed immediately, perhaps even suggested they all take shelter in the root cellar beneath the house. Instead, he found himself calculating. "You two head back," he said finally. "I have an errand in town, should make it before the worst hits." The brothers exchanged glances but didn't question him. By 3:30, Rhett was riding Copper toward La Veta, the wind picking up around him. The storm was approaching faster than he'd anticipated, and he pushed his horse to a canter, hoping to reach the meeting spot before Amelia arrived. He needn't have worried. As he approached the bend in the road, he spotted a figure already waiting Amelia, seated on a large rock beside the road, wearing a simple riding skirt and jacket, her hair in a practical braid. A beautiful chestnut mare was tethered to a nearby tree. "You came," she said, standing as he dismounted. Her expression held a mixture of pleasure and surprise. "Did you doubt I would?" Rhett asked, securing Copper beside her horse. "Storms like this send most men seeking shelter," she pointed out, "especially men with your particular history." Rhett glanced at the approaching wall of clouds. "I won't pretend I'm comfortable, but—" He turned back to her. "I'm trying to see it through your eyes." Amelia's smile was worth every flutter of anxiety in his chest. "Come," she said, extending her hand. "There's a meadow just beyond those trees. Perfect view of the valley and the approaching storm." Rhett took her hand, allowing her to lead him through a small copse of trees into a wildflower-dotted meadow that sloped gently downward, offering a panoramic view of the Spanish peaks and the valley between. The storm front was moving steadily toward them, dark and imposing. "This is where I come when I really want to experience the full power of a storm," Amelia explained. "No buildings, no distractions, just the natural world in all its glory." The first fat raindrops began to fall as they reached the center of the meadow. Rhett tensed involuntarily, his grip tightening on Amelia's hand. "We should still have 15 minutes before the lightning reaches us," she assured him, glancing at the sky with an expert's eye. "Plenty of time to retreat to the trees if you decide it's too much." Lightning flashed in the distance, followed nearly 30 seconds later by a low rumble of thunder. Rhett forced himself to breathe steadily, focusing on the warmth of Amelia's hand in his rather than the approaching tempest. "Tell me what you feel," she prompted softly. "Not what you fear, but what you actually feel in this moment." Rhett closed his eyes briefly, taking inventory of his sensations. "The wind," he said finally, "cooler than before, the rain on my face, your hand in mine." He opened his eyes, finding her watching him intently. "My heart beating faster, but not just from fear." "What else?" she encouraged. He considered, trying to look beyond his instinctive dread to the experience itself. "There's a smell in the air like the earth is waking up. And the colors, everything looks more vivid somehow. The green of the grass, the purple of those wildflowers, even the gray of the clouds has depth to it." Amelia's smile was radiant. "Yes, exactly. A storm heightens everything, makes you more aware of being alive." She turned to face the approaching weather front, still holding his hand. "Watch how the rain moves across the valley like a curtain." Rhett tried to focus on the beauty she was pointing out rather than the danger he'd been conditioned to fear. Another flash of lightning, closer now, followed by thunder after about 20 seconds. "It's moving quickly," he observed, proud that his voice remained steady. "Nature's greatest spectacle," Amelia agreed, her face alight with genuine joy. The rain increased, soaking through their clothing. Normally, Rhett would have been miserable and seeking shelter, but there was something freeing about standing in the open with Amelia, deliberately facing what had haunted him for so long. Lightning flashed again, much closer, and Rhett couldn't suppress a flinch. The thunder followed almost immediately, loud enough to feel in his chest. "Perhaps we should move to the trees now," he suggested, eyeing the distance they'd need to cover. "One moment," Amelia said, releasing his hand. "I promised to teach you to dance in the storm, remember?" Before he could protest, she stepped away from him, spreading her arms wide as the rain poured down. With the same grace she showed on stage, she began to move, spinning slowly with her face tilted upward, catching raindrops on her upturned palms. Lightning split the sky directly overhead, followed instantly by a deafening crack of thunder. Rhett's instinct screamed at him to run, to find shelter, to escape the deadly force above them. But Amelia continued her dance, unperturbed by the danger, her expression one of pure ecstasy. In that moment, watching her embrace what he had feared for so long, something shifted within Rhett. The old terror was still there, but alongside it grew a new emotion, a profound admiration for her courage, and a desire to share in her joy rather than remain imprisoned by his own past. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward into her dance. Amelia's eyes widened in surprise as he took her hands, guiding her into a simple turning step like those he'd learned at country socials years ago. "Mr. O'Malley," she laughed as they moved together in the rain, "I believe you're dancing in a thunderstorm." "So I am," he agreed, surprised by the exhilaration flowing through him, "though I'd prefer if you called me Rhett while we're risking death by lightning." Another brilliant flash illuminated her face, catching the droplets clinging to her eyelashes like diamonds. "Rhett," she said, his name on her lips somehow more intimate than their dance. "I knew you had courage in you." They moved together in the downpour for what might have been minutes or hours, time losing meaning in the strange bubble of their shared experience. When the lightning began striking too close for even Amelia's comfort, they ran hand in hand to the shelter of the trees, laughing like children. Under the partial protection of a large pine, they stood facing each other, breathless and dripping. Rhett reached out, gently brushing a strand of wet hair from Amelia's cheek. "Thank you," he said softly, "for showing me another way to see the storm." "Thank you for trusting me enough to try," she replied, her eyes reflecting the wildness of the weather around them. The air between them seemed charged with more than just the electrical energy of the storm. Rhett found himself leaning closer, drawn by something more powerful than fear or courage. Amelia's gaze dropped to his lips, then back to his eyes, a silent permission. When he kissed her, it was like lightning striking his soul, unexpected, powerful, transformative. Her lips were soft despite the rain, her response immediate and certain. His hands found her waist as hers moved to his shoulders, the contact grounding him even as the world seemed to spin around them. The kiss deepened, evolving from tentative exploration to something more urgent, more honest. In that moment, soaked to the skin beneath a storm-lashed pine, Rhett knew with absolute certainty that Amelia Blackburn had fundamentally changed his life. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly dazed, Amelia smiled up at him. "That," she said breathlessly, "was not part of the lesson plan." "A fortunate improvisation," Rhett replied, unable to stop his own smile. They stayed beneath the tree until the worst of the storm passed, talking quietly, exchanging occasional kisses, their hands rarely losing contact with each other. By the time they returned to their horses, the rain had slowed to a gentle patter and the thunder was a distant rumble. "Will you come to the saloon tonight?" Amelia asked as they mounted their horses. "If you'd like me to," Rhett replied. "I would." Her expression turned mischievous. "Though I warn you, Martha has eyes like a hawk. She'll know something has changed between us the moment she sees you." "Does that concern you?" he asked, suddenly worried about her sister's disapproval. Amelia considered the question. Martha wants what's best for me, even when we disagree about what that is. She'll be cautious because of Jonathan, but ultimately she trusts my judgment. She gave him a meaningful look, as do I. With that reassurance, they rode back toward town, parting ways at the edge with a promise to meet again that evening. As Rhett had feared and Amelia had predicted, Martha noticed the change immediately. When he arrived at the saloon that evening, she intercepted him before he could find a table. "Mr. O'Malley," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "Might I have a word before the performance?" She led him to her office, a small, orderly room adjacent to the main floor of the saloon. Once the door closed behind them, she turned to face him directly. "My sister returned from her afternoon ride looking rather like a drowned rat," Martha began without preamble. "Yet strangely, she seemed happier than I've seen her in months. I wonder if you might know anything about that." Rhett decided honesty was the only appropriate response. "We met during the storm. She's been helping me overcome a long-standing fear." "By dancing in thunderstorms," Martha's eyebrow arched. "Yes, she mentioned that particular philosophic approach of hers." "Among other things," Rhett acknowledged, maintaining eye contact despite his discomfort. Martha studied him for a long moment. "You care for her," she said finally. "It wasn't a question." "I do," he confirmed. "More than I expected to, and certainly more quickly than I would have thought possible." "Amelia has that effect on people," Martha said, a hint of fondness softening her expression. "She draws them in with her light." Her tone hardened again. "Jonathan Mercer tried to extinguish that light. I will not stand by and watch another man attempt the same." "I have no desire to change anything about her," Rhett said firmly. "Her spirit, her independence, her passion for music and storms and life itself, those are the very qualities that—" He hesitated, then finished honestly, "that make me love her." Something in Martha's demeanor shifted at his words. "Love is a significant claim after such a brief acquaintance, Mr. O'Malley. I'm as surprised as you are," he admitted, "but I know my own mind and heart." Martha walked to her desk, tracing a finger along its polished surface thoughtfully. "Do you know why we chose La Veta, Mr. O'Malley? Out of all the towns in the West?" The question seemed like a sudden change of subject, but Rhett sensed it was important. "I assumed the opportunity to purchase this establishment." "Partly," Martha agreed, "but primarily because of its name." La Veta means the vein in Spanish. It referred originally to the coal veins in these mountains, but Amelia and I saw it differently. A new vein of life, a fresh beginning. She turned back to him. "We've built something here, Mr. O'Malley, something that belongs to us alone." "I understand that," Rhett said, "and I respect it." "Do you?" Martha challenged. "Because loving Amelia means accepting that the Grand Hotel Saloon will always be part of her life, that her singing isn't merely a pastime but essential to who she is. That she will continue to dance in thunderstorms and follow her own compass, regardless of convention." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Rhett said simply. Martha's scrutiny continued for another long moment before she nodded once, seemingly satisfied. "Very well, Mr. O'Malley. I won't stand in the way of what's developing between you and my sister. But know this, if you hurt her, there isn't a place in Colorado territory remote enough to hide from me." Despite the seriousness of the moment, Rhett found himself smiling. "I believe you, Miss Blackburn. And I appreciate your concern for Amelia. She's fortunate to have you as a sister." Martha's expression softened again. "We're fortunate to have each other. Now, I believe you should find your table. The performance will begin shortly." Amelia's show that night seemed directed entirely at Rhett, though he knew objectively that she was performing for the entire audience. Every love song, every meaningful glance, every subtle gesture felt like a continuation of what had begun in the storm-swept meadow earlier that day. Afterward, with Martha's tacit permission, they spent another evening talking in the sisters' sitting room, this time with a new awareness between them, hands touching more frequently, gazes lingering longer, conversations deepening into more personal territory. Over the following weeks, their relationship blossomed. Rhett attended every performance he could manage, sometimes riding into town after a full day's work just to hear Amelia sing before returning to his ranch in the darkness. On her days away from the saloon, Amelia would often ride out to the ranch, sometimes helping with small tasks, other times simply keeping Rhett company as he worked. True to her promise, she continued to guide him through his fear of storms. Each time thunder rolled across the valley, they would face it together, sometimes from the window of her sanctuary, sometimes from the porch of his ranch house, and occasionally, when Rhett's courage was particularly strong, from the open meadow where they'd first kissed. By late August, most of Lavetta knew that Rhett O'Malley and Amelia Blackburn were courting. The town's reaction was mixed. Some approved of the match between the respectable rancher and the talented performer, while others gossiped about the propriety of a saloon singer becoming a rancher's wife. Rhett and Amelia paid little attention to the whispers, too absorbed in their growing attachment to each other. One evening in early September, as they sat on the porch swing at Rhett's ranch watching distant lightning illuminate the mountains, Amelia broached a subject they'd been circling for weeks. "Martha asked me yesterday what my intentions are regarding you," she said, her head resting against his shoulder. Rhett chuckled. "That's usually the question asked of the gentleman, not the lady. Martha has never been conventional," Amelia reminded him. "Neither have I, for that matter." "True enough." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And what did you tell her?" Amelia shifted to look at him directly. "I told her I'm in love with you, but that I'm afraid." The declaration and admission combined sent a jolt through Rhett more powerful than any lightning strike. Afraid of what? She took a deep breath. "Of losing myself, of becoming someone's wife instead of Amelia Blackburn, of giving up the stage, the saloon, the life Martha and I have built." Her eyes searched his. "Of discovering too late that you expected a conventional wife after all." Rhett took her hands in his. "Amelia, the woman I fell in love with, dances in thunderstorms and sings with the voice of an angel. Why would I want to change any part of that? Because men do," she said simply. "They say they admire a woman's spirit until that spirit inconveniences them. Jonathan swore he loved my singing until he realized it meant other men would look at me, admire me. Then suddenly it was unsuitable for a Mercer bride." "I'm not Jonathan," Rhett said firmly, "and I have no interest in changing a single thing about you. If that means my wife continues to perform at the Grand Hotel Saloon, so be it. If it means riding into town to hear you sing while I handle the ranch, I'll do it gladly." Hope bloomed in Amelia's eyes. "You truly mean that?" "With all my heart," he assured her. "Though I should probably make this more official." He slid from the swing to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "Amelia Blackburn, woman of storms and music and boundless courage, will you marry me, not to change or contain you, but to walk beside you through whatever life brings?" Tears filled Amelia's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Rhett O'Malley." He rose to kiss her, a silent promise sealed between them as lightning continued to flash on the horizon. They were married on a crisp October day, with the aspen trees blazing gold against the mountainsides. The ceremony took place in Lavetta's small church, with Martha as Amelia's attendant and Sam Jenkins as Rhett's best man. Most of the town turned out for the occasion, curiosity, if nothing else, bringing even the skeptics to witness the union of the rancher and the saloon singer. Amelia wore a gown of pale blue that matched her storm-colored eyes, with wildflowers in her hair instead of the traditional veil. Rhett, for his part, looked more nervous than he had during any thunderstorm they'd faced together, a fact that made Amelia smile reassuringly at him throughout the ceremony. The celebration afterward was held at the Grand Hotel Saloon, transformed for the day with white bunting and flowers. Walter Simmons had outdone himself with the refreshments, and the piano player was joined by 2 fiddlers from a neighboring town for the dancing. As the evening progressed, Martha approached the newlyweds, a rare smile softening her features. "Congratulations," she said, embracing her sister and then, to Rhett's surprise, offering him a brief hug as well. "I believe my sister has found a worthy partner." "High praise indeed," Rhett replied with a smile. "Thank you, Martha." "I've been thinking," Martha continued, addressing them both. "The rooms above the saloon are becoming cramped for the business we're doing. We should consider expanding, perhaps adding a proper hotel wing to justify the Grand Hotel part of our name." Amelia's brow furrowed. We've discussed this before, but the expense would be considerable, Martha agreed. But with Rhett's business acumen added to our own, perhaps it's time to reconsider. The three of us would make formidable partners, I think. Rhett exchanged a surprised glance with Amelia. Are you proposing a business partnership, Martha? Merely suggesting the possibility, Martha replied. You have land and cattle. We have an established business in town. There could be advantages to combining our interests, particularly if… She hesitated, then finished, particularly if there are children to consider eventually. The mention of children brought a blush to Amelia's cheeks and a thoughtful expression to Rhett's face. They hadn't discussed the possibility in detail yet, though both assumed children would be part of their future together. It's worth discussing, Rhett agreed, though tonight is for celebrating, not business negotiations. Of course, Martha conceded. We can talk more later, for now. She gestured toward the dance floor where couples were assembling for another set. I believe you should dance with your wife, Mr. O'Malley. As they moved onto the dance floor, Amelia leaned close to Rhett's ear. That's Martha's version of a blessing, she murmured. Offering to go into business with someone is her highest form of trust. I'm honored, Rhett replied sincerely. Though slightly terrified at the prospect of having her as a business partner, Amelia laughed. She's demanding but fair. And she's right, the three of us together could build something remarkable in La Veta. As the music started, Rhett pulled Amelia closer than was strictly proper for a public dance. We already have, he said softly. Something remarkable, I mean. Her smile was radiant as they moved across the floor, the rest of the room falling away until it seemed they danced alone, much as they had in the storm-swept meadow where they'd first acknowledged their feelings. Later that night, as they drove the short distance to Rhett's now their ranch, a distant rumble of thunder sounded from beyond the mountains. A storm coming, Amelia observed, nestled against Rhett's side on the wagon seat. Unusual for October. A good omen, I'd say, Rhett replied, surprising her. What better way to begin our marriage than with what brought us together? Amelia tilted her face up to him, her expression tender in the lantern light. You've come a long way from the man who cowered under the mercantile overhang, Rhett O'Malley. I had an excellent teacher, he acknowledged, pressing a kiss to her forehead. By the time they reached the ranch, the storm was approaching in earnest. Rather than hurrying inside as they might normally have done, Rhett helped Amelia down from the wagon, then took her hand. May I have this dance, Mrs. O'Malley? He asked formally, gesturing toward the open yard as the first raindrops began to fall. Amelia's delighted laugh was answer enough. Together, they danced beneath the gathering storm, neither of them afraid of what the sky might unleash or of the future they would build together, as unpredictable and powerful as the lightning that had brought them together. The following spring brought change to La Veta. With the combined resources of the O'Malley Ranch and the Grand Hotel Saloon, Martha's vision of expansion began to take shape. Construction started on a proper hotel wing adjacent to the saloon, designed to attract a more diverse clientele from cattlemen to the occasional wealthy tourist drawn by the spectacular mountain scenery. Rhett divided his time between the ranch and town, overseeing the construction while also building up his cattle herd. Amelia continued to perform 3 nights a week, her popularity only increasing as word spread of her talent. On the nights she wasn't performing, she would often ride out to the ranch, sometimes staying there for days at a time. Their arrangement raised eyebrows among some of La Veta's more conservative residents, but the success of both their businesses made it difficult for anyone to criticize too openly. Besides, as Martha pointed out with dry amusement, the gossip only increases attendance at the saloon. People come to disapprove and stay for the whiskey. Summer arrived with its thunderstorm season, and with it came an unexpected revelation. One evening in late June, as Rhett and Amelia sat on their porch watching an approaching storm, Amelia took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. We'll be 3 by Christmas, she said softly, her eyes searching his for his reaction. Rhett's expression transformed from confusion to wonder to absolute joy in the space of seconds. A baby, you're certain? Amelia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Dr. Morgan confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to be sure before I told you. Rhett gathered her into his arms, his own eyes suspiciously bright. A baby, he repeated, his voice filled with awe. Our baby. They sat together as the storm rolled in, discussing names and making plans. Amelia expressed concern about continuing her performances as her condition progressed, but Rhett was supportive of whatever she decided. Some women work right up until their time, he said. Others prefer to rest. It's entirely your choice, Amelia. And after, she asked hesitantly. When the baby comes, Rhett considered the question seriously. We'll figure it out together. Martha will help, I'm sure, and we can hire a nanny for the evenings you perform if you wish to continue. The fact that he assumed she would want to continue singing, that he didn't expect motherhood to fundamentally change her passion for performance, eased a worry Amelia hadn't fully acknowledged even to herself. I love you, Rhett O'Malley, she said, resting her head against his shoulder. More than I ever thought possible. And I love you, he replied, his hand still resting protectively over their unborn child. Both of you. Lightning flashed across the valley, followed by a rumble of thunder. Neither of them flinched. Instead, they watched the storm together, marveling at its beauty and power, much as they would marvel at the new life growing between them, a life born in its own way from a love that had been forged in the storm. As Amelia's pregnancy progressed, she and Rhett made the decision that she would continue performing until she reached her 7th month, then take a break until after the baby was born. Martha, upon learning of the impending addition to their family, became unexpectedly emotional. I never thought I'd be an aunt, she admitted to Amelia one afternoon as they went over the saloon's accounts. It's rather overwhelming. In a good way, I hope, Amelia asked, studying her normally composed sister. In the best way, Martha assured her. Though it does mean we need to accelerate some of our plans for the hotel expansion. A family suite should be added, I think, for when you and Rhett and the baby stay in town. The hotel construction continued through the fall, with Rhett proving to have an unexpected talent for architectural details and management. The relationship between him and Martha evolved from cautious respect to genuine friendship as they worked together, discovering they shared a similar approach to business despite their different backgrounds. By November, the Grand Hotel was taking shape as a proper establishment, with comfortable rooms for travelers, an expanded dining room, and a separate entrance for the saloon portion of the business. Martha had insisted on maintaining the highest standards for the hotel side, hoping to attract not just cowboys and drummers, but also the occasional wealthy visitor from the East. Amelia performed her final show before her break in late November, her condition now obvious beneath specially altered gowns. The audience gave her a standing ovation, many of them raising glasses in a toast to the baby's health. Rhett, watching from his usual table, felt a swell of pride and love so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. After the performance, as they prepared to travel back to the ranch for Amelia's confinement, Martha surprised them both with a gift, a beautiful cradle, hand-carved by one of the local craftsmen. For my niece or nephew, she said, her usual briskness softened by genuine emotion. To use whether you're staying in town or at the ranch. The winter of 1879-1880 was harsh, with heavy snowfalls and bitter cold gripping the valley. Rhett worried constantly about Amelia's comfort at the ranch, despite the sturdy construction of their home and the ample firewood he had stockpiled. But Amelia thrived in the quiet isolation, spending her days preparing for the baby, writing new songs, and helping Rhett with the indoor ranch chores that could be managed despite her advanced state. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire, Rhett often reading aloud while Amelia worked on knitting tiny garments. Sometimes they would simply talk, sharing dreams for their child's future and for their own. I want our child to know that fear can be overcome, Rhett said one night, his hand resting on Amelia's rounded belly as the baby kicked energetically. That what terrifies us doesn't have to control us. And I want our child to see beauty in the wildness of the world, Amelia added. To dance in storms, literal or figurative, rather than hide from them. With you as a mother, that's all but guaranteed, Rhett said with a smile, leaning in to kiss her. Their son was born on a clear, cold day in early January 1880. After a labor that left Rhett pacing anxiously while Martha and the midwife attended to Amelia, William Thomas O'Malley entered the world with a lusty cry that immediately captured his father's heart. "He's perfect," Rhett whispered, holding his son for the first time, marveling at the tiny fingers and the shock of dark hair that promised to be as black as his own. "Absolutely perfect. Of course he is," Amelia said tiredly from the bed, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. "He's ours." The first months of parenthood were a whirlwind of adjustment for both of them. William, called Will by his parents, proved to be a generally contented baby, though he had definite opinions about when he should be fed, changed, or held. Rhett took to fatherhood with unexpected ease, willing to walk the floor with his son at night or change diapers without complaint. By spring, they had established a comfortable routine. Amelia gradually resumed performing at the saloon, starting with just one night a week. On those evenings, Rhett would either care for Will at the ranch or, if the weather permitted, bring him into town where both Martha and Walter Simmons were always eager to hold the baby while Rhett watched Amelia's performance. The hotel portion of the business opened officially in April, with a small ceremony attended by most of the town. The mayor of La Veta cut a ribbon across the new entrance, declaring the establishment a significant advancement for our growing community. Martha, typically reserved, could not hide her pride as guests toward the new rooms and complimented the elegant furnishings she had selected. As summer approached, bringing with it the thunderstorm season, Rhett realized one evening that it had been almost a year since his last episode of storm-related panic. The realization came as he stood on the porch with 5-month-old Will in his arms, showing his son a distant lightning display while Amelia prepared supper inside. "See that, Will?" he said softly as light flashed across the distant mountains. "That's lightning. Some folks fear it, but your mama taught me to see the beauty in it." Will gurgled in response, his tiny hand gripping Rhett's finger. In that moment, standing with his son as nature displayed its power across the valley, Rhett felt a profound sense of completion. The fear that had once controlled so much of his life had been transformed, not erased, but channeled into something else. A healthy respect, yes, but also an appreciation for the raw power and beauty that Amelia had shown him. When Amelia joined them on the porch a few minutes later, she found them still watching the distant storm, Will's eyes wide with interest. "Starting his storm-watching education early, I see," she said, wrapping an arm around Rhett's waist. "Never too early," Rhett replied, kissing the top of her head, "though I think dancing in the rain might wait until he can walk." Amelia laughed, the sound still as captivating to Rhett as it had been the first time he heard it. "Agreed, though I have a feeling he'll take to it naturally." "With you as his mother, undoubtedly." As the lightning continued its distant display, the three of them stood together, a family forged in the storm and strengthened by it. Rhett thought of the frightened man he had been 2 years ago, cowering beneath an overhang while a storm raged around him. That man could never have imagined the life he would build with the wild woman dancing in the rain, a life full of music and courage and love that was as powerful and transformative as the lightning itself. "I was thinking," Amelia said after a comfortable silence, "about expanding our family again." "Not immediately, but perhaps next year." Rhett's heart swelled at the thought. "I'd like that," he said softly. "Very much." "Good." Amelia smiled up at him, her eyes reflecting the distant lightning, "because I think we'll should have a sibling to dance in storms with." "To dance in storms with," Rhett agreed, pulling her closer as their son babbled happily in his arms. "And to learn that the things we fear most can sometimes lead us to the greatest joy." Above them, the sky rumbled its approval, a gentle reminder of the force that had brought them together and taught them both to embrace the lightning.